Aloha and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where each week during the legislative session we give you a chance to hear directly from state senators about what's going on here at the state capitol. Current figures show Hawaii hosting over 10 million visitors a year, which is good news for our tourism-based economy. However, it's been estimated that as much as 20% of that growth over the past few years is attributable to services such as Airbnb and VRBO, which move transient accommodations out of the regular visitor areas and distribute them through private residences around the state. Joining us today to discuss these impacts and what we can do to control and benefit from this growth is Senator Glenn Wakai, who represents the 15th District, which includes Kalihi, Mapunapuna, Salt Lake, Foster Village, Hickam, Pearl Harbor, Aliamanu, and the airport. Aloha, Senator. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Nothing goes better with the Cheerios than policy discussion in the morning.
It's the best way to start your week.
It certainly is. Thanks for having me.
I recall a few years ago economists saying that our tourism economy had topped out and we needed to find new sources of income because we couldn't increase our inventory of hotel rooms. It was too expensive. And I guess they didn't foresee this disruption. How did this happen?
Well, the good news is that people love Hawaii all over the world. The bad news is I don't know if we've been managing the growth as well as we should. So you're seeing that there's some community pushback, and the sentiment of the community is that we really need to think about what the growth trajectory is for the future. And so I think the Hawaii Tourism Authority has certainly got the clear mandate that it's going to be a little bit less foot on the gas and a little bit more on the management side of things, and making sure that as we grow the economy, that the community embraces the tourists that come here and enjoy their stay here in the islands.
And what kind of stresses does this put on the local, not only the economy, but the local culture and how people are living in the various neighborhoods?
Well, we see, unfortunately, that sometimes tourists get into bad situations, go to trails that they're not supposed to, go into waters that they're not supposed to. So I think even on the public safety side, we have to make sure that we keep the tourists in designated tourism areas and not have to call not Air Force One, but Air One to go and save them. Their proliferation outside of the resort communities are having stresses in our communities, whether it's traffic or whether it's loud strangers that are living next door to you. Long gone are the days when everybody grows up in the cul-de-sac and knows everybody in that cul-de-sac. Now we're seeing more and more folks that are just newcomers, and I think it's kind of having a detrimental effect on the fabric of our community. So I think it's high time for the state as well as the city and counties to figure out what are the parameters for the managed growth of Airbnbs or short-term vacation rentals in our community.
Has anybody looked at what kind of impact this has on rental costs for residential? If I want to rent an apartment for $2,000, well, a landowner could make more money renting it out on a nightly basis.
Oh yeah, I mean there was a study by Appleseed which showed that if you were to rent or short-term vacation rent your apartment, you could get 3.5 times more than renting for a local resident. So I mean a lot of this is really fueled by greed, and we don't necessarily think that capitalism is good to a certain extent, but up until the point where it just messes up with the social fabric of a community where local people can't get someplace to live anymore because 20,000 or so units are now in short-term vacation rentals.
Well, so acknowledging that we can't just stop it, we can't just outlaw it, that hasn't worked. And also looking at the benefits, I mean, there's a lot of money coming into the economy. How is the legislature dealing with this, or are they leaving this at the county level?
Well, we're on our 4th year trying to get together on the House and Senate side a good short-term vacation rental bill, but this really is something that the counties should be driving. We're almost putting the cart before the horse. We're trying to figure out how's the state going to fit in to a regime that the county should have really put together. It would be so much easier if the 4 counties have figured out what are the parameters for this, and then the state comes in and just kind of gets the taxes out of this. But absent any kind of clear direction from the counties, we're kind of back and forth on where does the state fit in trying to put some guardrails around this industry.
What about planning and zoning? Do we need to change our approach to that to try to recapture the control over the situation?
Well, if I were on the city council, I would think that this is something that my community really desperately needs. But we're seeing that 4 different counties have 4 very different approaches to figuring out land use and permitting.
And I have noticed in my own neighborhood, I see strangers walking up and down the street now because we have there's Airbnbs on my street, which used to be regular residential. Do we know where these impacts are throughout the community? I mean, are there more in Kalihi or in Manoa? Or
What was most startling, I think the statistics I remember was 1 out of every 18 units in Hawaii now is a short-term vacation rental. On Kauai, it's 1 out of every 7. And in Lahaina, it's 1 out of every 3 units in Lahaina is a short-term vacation rental. That is far too many strangers in our communities.
So basically, it's turned Lahaina completely into a tourist destination,
Right.
and there are no more local people living there. Basically.
Well, there are
Right.
3 out of every, 2 out of every 3 that are local,
Right.
but that is far too many visitors in our communities.
Right. And again, I mean, looking at this as what about the benefits? I mean, are we getting all the benefits we can out of it? Are we collecting all of the TAT and the taxes associated with it?
We're not collecting I shouldn't say, we're collecting a fraction of what we should be collecting from the TAT. But to me, the biggest impact is the social elements of not having local people have a place that's affordable for them to stay in.
And have the owners been getting involved, or are they trying to stay in the shadows?
Well, if you're a short-term vacation rental owner, the status quo is good for you, right?
Right.
The more it's wild, wild west, the more I can stuff my house with as many people as I can and extract as much money out of that accommodation as possible, of course. But that's where government is responsible for making sure that we have some level of calmness and order in our communities.
And infrastructure-wise, this has to put some strain on, you know, if you used to have a house that had a family of 3 living in it, and now you constantly have 10 people in the house. Are we planning for infrastructure changes in response to this?
Well, if you're on the city side, I would imagine having short-term vacation rentals increase the property taxes, and maybe they're planning for it, but I don't get the sense that they are. Cities and counties are just scooping the increase in property taxes to go pay for other things. I don't think there's a long-term plan of, ooh, Lanikai, you have so many, we got to increase the sewer capacity. Ooh, we need to widen the roads. I don't hear any of that discussion. It's just collect the property taxes and kind of turn away and pretend that they're not being disruptive in our communities.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have to talk about this a lot more going into the future. I want to thank you for being here and helping the public understand it more. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Olela, for this time. And we'll see you next time live at the legislature.